Lucha? You want Lucha? You want Lucha? I've got Lucha for you!
What is up, everyone? It's Adam from FWCI on YouTube, and I am here with my co-host Malik.
How's it going, guys?
And this is the Back to the Temple podcast, the Lucha Underground Rewatch podcast. So what we're going to do here is go through the whole Lucha Underground series week by week, episode by episode, have a look at what happened, break it down. We've got some other fun segments and stuff that are going to be really fun to go through on this podcast. But the whole dynamic here is I'm a huge fan of Lucha Underground. I've seen it. I've seen the first 3 seasons multiple times. Haven't seen the 4th season yet, so it will be fun when we get to season 4. And Malik, on the other hand, has never seen Lucha Underground before, and he's just starting to peel back the layers on some more obscure wrestling. He's 19 and he loves his wrestling. But Malik, great to have you on here as a co-host, and tell us what you enjoy when it comes to pro wrestling, and what kind of wrestling have you been getting into so far in your short journey on this topic?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, man. So, basically this past year I've tried to experiment in all different kinds of wrestling companies because I stuck to WWE, WCW, ECW as a trifecta, and I never really moved away from that. And I met a guy recently near me who sold tapes of like other companies and stuff like that. And it was companies like MLW and ROH. And it was all these different kind of companies, and I started getting into that kind of stuff. And when you told me about Lucha Underground, I never got into Lucha before, and I was really keen to see what it was about and see that kind of wrestling. We'll get into it more later, but it was a really cool experience.
So you love your wrestling, and yeah, good to hear that you're experimenting in some other forms of wrestling. Lucha Libre is certainly a quite a rabbit hole to go down. But in regards to why we started this podcast, why did I choose Lucha Underground? First of all, I always like the podcast where you have the perspective of somebody who's a super fan and the perspective of somebody who is experiencing these things for the first time. So that's one of the reasons why we got Malik on here to do this. But Lucha Underground was just my favorite promotion ever, even though it was only short-lived. I'm big into comic book characters, and I've always loved Lucha Libre. Rey Mysterio was, one of the big reasons that I got so into pro wrestling at a young age, and this was my first opportunity to follow Lucha Libre on a week-to-week basis. So it was just something that really connected to me. It's such a wild show as well. They really commit to the whole illusion of this world that they're putting together, and it's just a fantastic show to go back and watch. And because it's so episodic, you can watch it in episodes and it makes a little bit of sense. It's not like watching WWE, which is never ending. So this podcast is going to go for a few years, considering how many episodes there were, and I can't wait to get stuck into it. But is there anyone that you kind of know of that you're interested to see that is in this promotion?
The only name that I recognized, or the only names, was Penta and Phoenix from AEW, and that was it. Only until I actually started watching it just the other day did I even know that Chavo Guerrero was a part of the whole thing. So
you've just watched episode 1 at this point, is that right?
Yes.
Right, okay. So you've found out that we've got Chavo, Johnny Mundo, which you said, I'd never heard him called Johnny Mundo. That's all I know him as, is Johnny Mundo. He's always Johnny Mundo to me. And obviously Ricochet as Prince Puma as well. So, but Penta and Phoenix, yeah, you're going to be in for quite a ride if you're anticipating some Pentagon and Phoenix goodness, because they are huge parts of this show.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah. So, just quickly brushing on how Lucha Underground was formed. So, in 2014, there was a Triple Mania event, Triple Mania 22, and I'm not entirely sure of all the circumstances around it. I think Richard Rodriguez, which is the director behind a movie called Machete and other things like that, he has had a big part of it, and I really want to learn more about how much his involvement was in the making of this show and then continuing of this show. But he was a huge part of getting this show given approval, and at the Triple Mania event, we actually had Dario Cueto show up and like recruit a whole bunch of luchadors, or invite the luchadors from AAA to participate in his temple. And it was a really, I think that's a really fun way to debut a television show, because it's not really a promotion. Like, as we go through this, you'll see it's not really a wrestling promotion as much as it is a television show. So it's kind of crazy, and especially with the history of Lucha Underground as well, they are very rooted in like a luchador will be in movies and things like that as their own character sort of thing. Like, it was huge and very common for luchadors to transition into more cinematic kind of stuff. So it was such a great take on bringing Lucha Libre into the 21st century and making it contemporary. So that's basically how it all started. Then it just sort of debuted on TV, and it was off to the races from there. But I mean, in regards, I'm not even sure what else there is to say about it, because it's just that kind of it almost feels like a renegade promotion, but again, it's not. It's a TV show.
Yeah, and I think the distinction between TV show and wrestling promotion is one of the major things that just makes this company so entertaining to watch. Like, the first episode gripped me just like an episode of Breaking Bad would, almost. And for a lot of wrestling shows, it's hard for that to happen. As much as I enjoy wrestling, I enjoy the medium, it can't hook me like if I'm watching a show like The Sopranos, because they're two totally different things. But Lucha Underground had that down to a T.
Yeah, mainstream wrestling like WWE kind of leaves you going like, oh, okay, well, next week when that happens, like, well, it'll be interesting to see what, you know, this person has to say about that. But like Breaking Bad or Walking Dead in its day, and, you know, The Boys is a show that I'm absolutely in love with. You get to the end of an episode and there's like this, you know, anticipation inside you for the next one. Like, oh my god, I want to see it so bad. And Lucha Underground does a good job of finding ways to do that repeatedly. There's always a great cliffhanger at the end of a Lucha Underground episode. So yeah, if that's something that you're interested in, then you will definitely enjoy this journey.
Yeah, as definitely with the cliffhanger thing, episode 1 had the perfect cliffhanger. I really want to see what's happening in episode 2 now.
Well, that's a great segue, because let's jump into the episode breakdown. So the format of the show, we break down the episode segment by segment, have a bit of chat about what's going on with those segments, and then afterwards we've got some fun little weekly segments that we'll do as well. So we'll talk about those later on. But the intro to this show is the Dragon Azteca intro with a weird voiceover saying, "Come with me." And then we should get the story of the ancient 7 Aztec tribes, and a bit of Dario's promo from the Triple Mania, which I mentioned a bit earlier, and the shots of Puma and Mil Muertes coming down from the mountains. So what did you think about the start of this show being so rooted in like history and like mythology and stuff like that, as far as, you know, bringing in the ancient Aztec tribes and this, you know, almost like ninja movie kind of guy in the very opening scene?
Yeah, that's something I really, really loved about the show, and I wrote extensive notes about it. Like, as I said before, I never knew a thing about Lucha Libre, except that there's luchadors, and they exist. That's all my knowledge. From that intro, especially, and the whole mythology tying between the, like, Aztecan warriors and the brawls and all that kind of thing, it was so cool, because I love the... I love the almost outlandish comic book nature of wrestling sometimes, when it can just go balls to the wall crazy. And that intro showed me everything I needed to know about Lucha Libre and about the show from the start.
Yeah, I hope throughout this podcast I get to learn more about Lucha Libre myself. I'd love to get somebody on here and have a chat about the history of Lucha Libre. I think this is somewhat accurate, to be honest. Like with the losing of the mask symbolizes like the removing of the head from their enemies and stuff from back in the day. I think that rings a bell as something that is a genuine part of Lucha Libre history, but it is a topic that I'm very intrigued to go down the rabbit hole of a lot more, and this podcast will be the perfect place to do it. So that's going to be interesting, and I like that it sets up Puma and Muertes being from different Aztec tribes as well, like just showing them coming down the hill towards Los Angeles or San Diego or wherever it is that they are. It's just a great visual of these warriors coming down for battle.
Yeah, it really gets you excited to see what's going to happen when the wrestlers actually do get in the ring. And for a lot of wrestling promotions, it's kind of hard for me to get excited for a match sometimes unless there's like a really good story or a really good build behind it, or maybe there was a fucking awesome promo. But to get me excited just to see your matches from a fucking 1 minute intro almost was insane. It was perfect.
Yeah. It's very cool visuals. But we get a look at the temple, Dario Cueto's temple, with Matt Striker and Vampiro on commentary. So, interesting commentary duo. I've never been a fan of Vampiro. Everything I've read about him, he seems like a pretty volatile kind of guy. But I really enjoy him on commentary on Lucha Underground. I don't think it would have had the same feel without him on there with his extensive Lucha Libre history, like very, very significant history. Vampiro's time in Mexico is legendary. So him being on there added a great element to it. And I've always enjoyed Matt Striker's commentary. A lot of people don't like it, but his kind of almost cartoonish delivery, not delivery, but his cartoonish just sayings and stuff that he says and how dramatic he is. He can be overly dramatic. It's a great fit for Lucha Underground. But have you seen much of Matt Striker or Vampiro before the show?
Never heard of Matt Striker before the show, but I have seen Vampiro through WCW. I've always just known him as the Misfits guy.
The dreadlock guy?
Yeah. But, yeah, I got to agree with you. I think they were really great commentators. Especially Vampiro. Vampiro was dropping a lot of knowledge, especially during the first match, just explaining more and more history that the intro didn't get into, and more about how the luchador wrestling style works in the ring. And everything he was doing in the matches either elevated what was going on or elevated the in-ring action.
Yeah, you're going to learn a lot from Vampiro throughout the seasons of Lucha Underground. But Matt Striker was in WWE for some time. He was a commentator there, but before that, he actually had a short run as a school teacher, like a heel school teacher. He used to wear the vest, the school teacher looking vests, and he had a talk segment where he had a classroom set up. It was Mr. Striker's classroom or something, and he was a really goofy heel on the WWE iteration of ECW. So
actually, that sounds like a pretty fun gimmick.
It was actually really fun. A lot of people won't admit it, but I think it was very interesting. And fun fact, he was actually a school teacher. I believe he got fired because he was taking sick days to go to wrestling school, and they found out something like that, and he got fired for it. So he actually has a bit of an interesting story. But Melissa Santos, our ring announcer, introduces Dario Cueto for a promo. Melissa Santos is absolutely amazing. I think this is not just because we're doing a Lucha Underground podcast. I think she's the best ring announcer in the business. You're going to see her do some very unique ring announcements. You're going to see her ring announcements evolve as we see her become involved in certain elements of the show. I'm obviously not going to say any spoilers because you haven't seen stuff, but keep an eye on Melissa Santos as the season goes through.
Yeah, alright. I wasn't too impressed from the first episode, but it was only the first episode, so I'll just keep an eye out for...
Yeah, she's a fun character to watch throughout the series. But she's, like I say, she's a lot more than just an announcer. She becomes a very important and legitimate character on the show. But Dario Cueto, my guy, he goes by Cesar Duran now, and has something to do with MLW. I don't know when this podcast is going to go up and how current that's going to be, but Dario Cueto's still around in the wrestling world as Cesar Duran. He is, without doubt, my favorite authority figure in any wrestling promotion in history ever. I absolutely love Dario Cueto. I think you've seen when we've been zooming, I have a big massive Dario Cueto framed picture on my wall of him in orange just looking down.
And spares.
What's that?
And you have a spare one too? A spare photo of
I do
Dario.
have a spare one, yes, just in case anything happens to my framed one, I've got a spare. Because I love Dario. He was, honestly, him and Pentagon were like my 1A and 1B favorite things in Lucha Underground. They were both just absolutely incredible. So what were your initial thoughts of the character Dario Cueto?
Ooh, so the one thing that I really liked about Dario is I can't say at this point if he's my favorite, like you said, because I haven't seen enough of him. But one thing that Dario has as an authority figure that I don't see from any other authority figure in wrestling is that he's really truly believable. Like, Vince McMahon can go on TV and do like dickish things, but when Dario like says he's gonna screw with somebody, or Dario's plotting to screw somebody, you can just see it in his eyes and his tone and his mannerisms. He's got his acting on point. Like,
I think you're talking about when he's anytime he talks about violence, he gets real joyous and serious.
When he gets into the violence part too, yeah.
Yes, the violence is Dario Cueto's mantra. You're going to hear violence
Scary
in
man.
Dario Cueto. Yes, you're going to hear a lot more about violence as this goes on. In fact, I believe his exact words were, Lucha Underground was all about ancient traditions, courage, honor, and violence is the exact quote. So, and there will be a lot of violence. You will see, I don't know if it's quite like ECW in the 90s level violence, but there will be episodes where that will push that. I promise you. So Dario definitely pulls through on his promise.
Yeah, I can't wait.
But Dario announces that the most impressive luchador tonight gets a signing bonus of $100,000. So in episode 1, I think it's a good move to introduce an incentive without just like blowing your load immediately and saying, this is our championship. Like, just any kind of incentive for people to fight over is good storytelling. And again, we're probably going to come back to this a lot. Good storytelling is very much the backbone of Lucha Underground. I swear to God, as we go through this story is going to make so much more sense than maybe when people watched it week to week the first time. The writing on this is absolutely amazing. So 100K is up for grabs. We get the first ever match in Lucha Underground history, which was Blue Demon Jr. defeating Chavo Guerrero Jr. via submission, which was a interesting match. It rooted the tradition of Lucha Libre into Lucha Underground immediately. Obviously, Blue Demon Jr. is the son of Blue Demon, who is a legendary luchador. Chavo Guerrero, obviously, not what needs to be said. He's part of the Guerrero dynasty. It was a good opening match. I can't fault them for wanting to do this as the first ever Lucha Underground match, but it did. It would have been nice to see like some real fast-paced lucha action, but but again, the storytelling with this match and what the ramifications of this is, we find out later in the show. But what were your thoughts on Blue Demon Jr.? We're going to try and have to perfect our Spanish accents. Blue Demon Jr. and Chavo Guerrero Jr.
Oh man, so This match, when Chavo Guerrero come out, I didn't expect him to be the first match on the card, and I kind of flipped my shit when I did, because I love Chavo so much. And when they got in the ring, it wasn't... Yeah, like you said, it wasn't a fast-paced match, but I kind of enjoyed that because, like I said before, Vampiro was explaining the traditions of Lucha Libre wrestling, and it seemed like it was kind of just a slow education, that first opening bit, even the first match. And the second and third matches were really fast and really just interesting and fun to watch beginning to end. And the first one was a bit of a slog, but it might have just been because it was more of an education.
No, I think you make a really good point there. It's a balance between, you know, you're going to have a lot of exposition in a show like this with Matt Stryker and Vampiro on commentary. Again, kind of just volunteering information like, well, Dario Cueto is known for his, you know, business dealings. Like there was a lot that they had to say, and I guess it's hard to acknowledge the action in the ring that if it's so, you know, fast-paced and hectic, when you're also trying to cover these other topics as well. So I would say that went into the decision making of having this match go on first, is like, you know, we can use this sort of slower match to introduce our audience to the whole Lucha Underground or Lucha Libre sort of tradition, and also honor the Lucha Libre tradition by having two legends like Blue Demon Jr. and Chavo Guerrero Jr. in the opening match. After that, we have Conan. Conan. What are we calling him? Conan.
The Barbarian.
Conan. I think it's Conan. He is in Dario Cueto's office, which I don't know if you can tell the the layout of the temple, but Dario's office is like right there next to the ring, which is kind of weird because he has like daylight coming in, I think. So I'm not sure where the daylight comes from, but there will be times where you'll see very clearly where Dario Cueto's office is located. But Conan's in there, and Dario asks Conan to make sure an example is made out of Johnny Mundo in the main event tonight. So we know Johnny Mundo is coming, and we know Conan has got his guy from the streets from Boyle Heights, aka Prince Puma. So again, a lot of stuff to introduce in the first episode. We now know that Conan is a part of it. We now know that Johnny Mundo's a part of it. Such a little segment that is, you know, kind of a throwaway segment, really introduced a lot more of the world and the landscape of this show. But talk to me about Conan. Have you've watched some old WCW? Any thoughts on K-Dog?
I've paid attention to Conan's work in the past, but I was never too much of a fan of him because he did have a slower style. Even in WCW, kind of wrestled a slower style, and because I wasn't used to Lucha Libre and that kind of thing, I was more exposed to the crazy ECW and WWE kind of matches. It wasn't my thing, but...
Well, Conan came to WCW. He's like Vampiro. They're both Lucha Libre legends. Conan used to wear like a loincloth looking like attire and these like strappy vest kind of things. But when he went to WCW and joined the NWO Wolfpack, he pretty much flipped his whole style to just be very much the standard American style. He'd bust out some lucha moves every now and then, but they were very much peppered into his WCW persona. So he definitely has like two lives in regards to his wrestling career.
Yeah,
or three if you include.
I must have been watching WCW episodes before he joined. Did you say Wolfpack it was?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I've been watching before that
for a second. Yeah. I'm not sure when he came in, but I don't recall him being around WCW without being in the NWO. So I don't know how long it took him to join. But he also had some great work in TNA when he was the mouthpiece for LAX, the Latin American Exchange, or Latin American Express, one of those, which was Homicide and Hernandez. And Conan was, and I think he even managed Santana and Ortiz at one point as LAX as well. So,
oh really?
He's definitely put in his hours in the world of wrestling. But
was this before Lucha Underground or after?
Yes. No, this was... I think he might have popped up after and helped out Santana and Ortiz, but before Lucha Underground, he was in TNA with Homicide and Hernandez.
All right.
But as much as you and I love Conan, you know who fucking hates him?
Who?
Vampiro.
Really? Like in a real life beef kind of thing, or?
100%. Like I say, they both were around Mexico and Lucha Libre in like the 90s, and they were both huge names. I'm sure there's some awkwardness from that whole time, but just pay attention to Vampiro on commentary. Anytime Conan's around, he's like, don't trust him. He's untrustworthy. He's going to be the demise of Prince Puma. It's going to be because he listened to Conan. Like, he just has this unbridled hatred towards him. So keep an ear out for that, because I don't know how much of that is just playing it up and how much of that is willingly playing it up because he actually hates him.
Yeah, I'm imagining it was just kind of like a Prince and Rick James situation where they're just both really competitive to the point they just hate each other.
It definitely would have been like that. They were both, very significant names in Mexico in those days. We get a training segment with Prince Puma and Conan. He puts Puma over pretty damn hard in this one here. Like, I was all on board for Prince Puma after this training montage, and great way to introduce Ricochet into this as well by showing this, beautiful slow motion footage of him doing these amazing things. So, great little training montage with Ricochet, who is now called Prince Puma.
Yeah. So he was in TNA as Ricochet, right?
No, I don't know if he was in ROH, but he was basically on the indies until he went to WWE.
Oh, right. I must have got him confused with someone else.
Yeah, no, I actually got to see one of his last indie matches when they came out to Australia. And Austin Aries was also there, and he grabbed the mic after his match and cut a promo on the promoters for having such a shitty ring. And he was using Ricochet as an example. He was like, this guy's about to go on to, the biggest years of his life, and you can't even give him a ring that's like...
And quite frankly, this wrestling ring is a fucking disgrace.
Safe to land on. I think there was a piece of something was sticking up, and people could have really hurt themselves on it. But yeah, Austin Aries was very defensive of Ricochet. But we got Conan explaining a bit more about lucha history with the 7 tribes and how they would have their own champion, and the Aztec luchadors would claim the head of a fallen opponent, and that linked the mask to being a symbol for life in Lucha Libre, is how he explains it. So same as we get that kind of Lucha Libre history lesson from Vampiro, we're getting the exact same thing from Conan, and both of them are, authorities on the history of Lucha Libre. Like I say, they're both significant legends in that sport. Yeah.
And that part where they were talking about removing the mask is kind of removing their identity, removing their face. That was one of the coolest things that I've ever had explained to me, because I've always been curious on why it's been such a big deal with the masks in lucha wrestling. And when a luchador wrestler ever got his mask taken off in WWE or WCW or anything, it never really meant anything to me now. But if I see it happen in Lucha Underground to someone, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be like, right, this is fucking huge kick in the gut for this guy. It means something.
It is meaningful, and I don't know if there's any real legitimate unmaskings anymore, to be honest. Not just in Lucha Underground, but just in Lucha Libre in general. I'm sure there would be at times, but it's not the kind of thing that comes along very often. So and with Lucha Underground, because this is a TV show, a lot of these guys were... What was weird about this is you would have somebody who was like a babyface on Lucha Underground, and they were a heel on Impact Wrestling or in MLW or something like that. A lot of these guys were wrestling for promotions as well as doing the Lucha Underground TV show as the same characters. So Lucha Underground's really in a bubble on its own. So if we do see somebody lose a mask, it wouldn't hold the real weight of a legitimate lucha unmasking. But with that being said, don't forget how important the unmasking is, because it is something that is important in the show.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that Lucha Underground is in its own like bubble as its own thing, it's just another one of the things that just makes it awesome. Because as a fan who watches a lot of wrestling and never grew up with the history, and so when I get into like wrestling organizations, even newer ones like AEW, I have to do so much homework on everybody and see everybody's career to even understand the story of what's going in the show now, like with their characters. But with Lucha Underground, I don't have to do any of that, and I can just from the start get invested in all of them.
Absolutely. And there are going to be characters that come into the show that are wrestlers that you know, and they will be a new character that you've never seen before.
And I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah, in fact, we get a bit of that at the end of this episode, but we then get another vignette for Sexy Star. Now, Sexy Star says some pretty full-on shit, to be completely honest. This is not a wishy-washy kind of character. She says, I came from a world of abuse, I contemplated suicide, but the mask saved my life. I lace up my boots for all the girls out there who need to get on their feet. I train for every girl who no longer needs to be afraid, and I win for every girl out there who needs a hero. Every woman is sexy. Every woman is a star. And Sexy Star... so I enjoyed that character when I first watched this show. I like the defiant female aspect that they've got in her storyline as well, that she is somebody who has overcome abuse, and this is like a very it's a very superhero-like kind of story for people that might be in that kind of situation and stuff like that. And she's actually an incredibly strong character. Now, before I go on with this, what were your initial thoughts of Sexy Star and this sort of build-up that they've given us?
I was all into it. From the second she started talking, and even the montage of her fighting the attackers in what looked like the alleyway or the parking lot. Everything beginning to end made me want to root for her, and it was one of the most badass introductions I've ever seen for a wrestler. And they didn't need any interviewer for them. It was just her speaking, and it was so good. And when the second match started, we'll get into the second match later when we get into that, but I was all for Sexy Star to win that match. Even though the odds were totally against her, I was rooting for her just because of this little vignette. So,
with all that being said, Sexy Star in recent years had a bit of an incident with, there's a wrestler called Rosemary. I hope I'm getting all this right, but there was basically some kind of, I don't know if it was a dispute or a misunderstanding or just hatred towards each other, but Sexy Star basically went into business for herself and was shooting on Rosemary during a match. So, she says she was doing it in self-defense, and it's clear that she kind of wasn't. But, I mean, it's pretty old news at this point, but it's weird that Sexy Star would then be in a situation where she's kind of taking advantage of somebody physically, during a wrestling match, because, you know, the whole being a professional thing is to look after your opponent, and if you're not, then you're taking advantage of them physically. So, Sexy Star's reputation since Lucha Underground, not the best. Not the best.
Yeah, you know, I had, really, really just great thoughts about it. That did not help at all.
Well, don't let it ruin the show for you anyway, because she's a big part of this show moving forward. So we're going to see a lot more Sexy Star, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities to talk more about that incident as I get more caught up on it. But Son of Havoc defeated Sexy Star with a backbreaker from hell. Oh my god,
that looks straight out of Batman, when Bane broke his back in half. It was brutal. My jaw dropped and I gasped and everything, which is really hard to get me to do with a wrestling match, but they sold it so perfectly.
Yeah, we're going to get plenty of intergender wrestling in this show, and I'm all for that. And again, that's something we'll talk about, I'm sure, a lot throughout the course of this podcast. But my notes on that match were: is that Havoc's real voice? Because I don't think. I think it's Matt Cross. His name is. I don't think his voice sounds like that, and I'm not sure why they
we had the
modulated it
same
down.
notes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that may kind of change as the season goes on, because I don't remember him having this voice for very long. But kind of an odd choice. But I guess that's the benefit of being able to, edit these things in post-production. You can do stuff like, let's just make his voice deep, like, if you want to, I guess. Sounds like Shaq.
To me, it sounded like, I can't remember the name of the character, but it was one of the aliens in Men in Black that Will Smith talks to. Like, the really deep voice. That's what Son of Havoc sounded like to me.
Yes, yeah, he did. But, I mean, this match was Wrestling 101. The heel challenges the babyface to leave. He's talking down to Sexy Star right after we've seen the vignette showing that, she's been disrespected and, downtrodden or whatever. In fact, I'm surprised that Sexy Star didn't get the win in this match, to be honest. But it was a great match, and again, storytelling-wise, I'm sure this isn't the last we're going to see of Sexy Star versus Son of Havoc.
Yeah, it was a great match, and the start of the match, when Sexy Star left and then ran back into the ring, it was, just an explosive start. The second she ran in, it was like a ticking time bomb saying, all right, this is when shit hits the fan. And from then, it was just crazy move after crazy move after crazy move. It didn't slow down for any of the match. And she kept up with Son of Havoc. They've got two crazy different size differences, but athletically, they were both equal.
Yeah, absolutely. The chemistry between them is actually pretty good, but that tactic, the whole, all right, I'm gonna let you leave here, and I'm not gonna I'm gonna allow you to get yourself counted out. That is a heel wrestling tactic that goes back to the 50s and 60s. That is just textbook wrestling, which is why I've called this match Wrestling 101, because it's just your absolute textbook version of that exact storyline, which is an absolute classic. So good to see that match happen, but we get a Chavo Guerrero, Dario Cueto vignette where Dario walks in to bust Chavo's balls about losing his match and says he needs to bring somebody in to finish the job, and 1,000 deaths might be coming for us all.
Eerie little...
I'm not gonna confirm what that means. I know exactly what he's talking about there. And yes, this is the beauty of this show. I want to leave you in suspense of 1,000 deaths. What does that mean? So I'm not gonna say where that leads, but again, great performance by Dario Cueto. Can really get stuck into that role of antagonizing Chavo. He's like, oh, you lost the match, Chavo. Oh, what are you gonna do? Just so scummy and so sleazy in that whole section there. So
yeah,
Chavo versus Dario, I'm here for that.
That segment kind of cemented Dario in my head as being an amazing heel. It was that point in the episode specifically that made me love to hate him. And especially was the part too when he says to Chavo, oh, what would your grandfather think and stuff like that. It was, he such a hateable person, but you love to hate him.
Yeah, well, Dario, the actor who plays Dario, I'll look up his name before the next episode. He has nothing to do with wrestling. He was an actor.
Really?
And they hired him, as an actor to play this role in a TV show, basically. And he just knocked it out of the park. That's why I love that character and that whole story so much. It's such an unorthodox way to get a good character in wrestling, and he just killed it every single time. So Dario is definitely the man, in my opinion. But,
yeah. I never would have guessed he was a real actor. He's got acting chops, don't get me wrong, but it kind of seems hard for me to see that an actor trying to get into wrestling. and take it serious.
If you've watched any of the recent seasons of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he actually pops up in an episode as a doctor.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah.
The Roddy Piper episode's
like,
my favorite, so I've got to see this.
You know what's weird? I think he's a meme as well. I think he was like a soccer referee meme.
I think I remember which one you're talking about.
Yeah, he's like standing there like with a yellow and green striped shirt on with his hands on his hips or something. I think.
Yeah, I remember.
Maybe he's holding a red card or something. I can't remember. But yeah, Dario is awesome. But 1,000 deaths might be coming for us all, and it's the main event: Johnny Mundo versus Prince Puma. Johnny Mundo picking up the win with his finisher, which he calls in Lucha Underground the end of the world. Not a fan of Johnny Mundo's finisher. I think that's a pretty good name, especially since the word Mundo means world, so he's Johnny World. That's kind of the Spanish pronunciation of it. So End of the World is a pretty good name, but he needs to start hitting that. You know, we've been saying this for like 15 years. Johnny Mundo needs to start hitting his finisher properly, and he did okay in this one. I think he could have hit it a little bit more concise, but awesome 20-minute match to cap off the debut show. I was critical of the opening match, but I'd rather this be the main event with the build-up through the show rather than be the opening match. Like, we get Chavo and Blue Demon, the story is there based on just who they are, but this main event we got to learn that there's 100k to be given out. We know that Dario's got Conan, you know, take out Johnny Mundo for me. We know Prince Puma is the shit. We got a lot of build up for this main event. What were your thoughts on the main event of Johnny Mundo versus Prince Puma?
When you said 20 minutes, it blew my mind, because when I watched the match beginning to end, it felt like 5. It went that quick for me, because it was another explosive, fast match, like the second match in the episode. But it was so entertaining all the way through. Johnny Mundo, his finisher, like, as you said before, it wasn't horrible, like, it wasn't egregiously bad to the point where the finisher took me out of everything, but I can't compare it to other Johnny Mundo finishes, so I'm not sure how that part was. It was all right for me. I didn't have any issues with the finish.
He has just a bad habit of not connecting enough on that twisting, corkscrewing, split-legged moonsault that he does.
Yeah, but I gotta say, the moves before that move were insane. They looked brutal.
Yeah, you're right. I am nitpicking on the one thing that I didn't like about it, but yeah, you're right. This match, like these two, this was where I think Lucha Underground realized, like, I think we could actually pull this off, because John Morrison, or Johnny Mundo in this case, perfect choice for this promotion. Ricochet, perfect choice for this promotion, and they were two wrestlers that you can also say, all right, guys, here's 20 minutes, go out there and, like, just go nuts. And that's what you get, is this kind of thing. And again, this is just scratching the surface of what kind of matches we're going to see in Lucha Underground. But I thought it was a fantastic match, a great main event for the opening show. But obviously, all the juice and all the meat come after the match, as Dario comes out with his briefcase full of 100k. Mundo and Puma babyface it up in the ring. They're like, you know, congratulating each other. You know, they're both good guys, so they're like, yeah, well done, mate. And Cueto won't give the cash to Mundo, even though he won. Did you see that coming?
I saw something coming, because I knew he wasn't willing to give the money to Johnny Mundo, and I expected an attack. But when he was out in the ring, it seemed like he was in the ring for a little too long. Like, there was a little bit of a delay where it was that slight bit of hope that Johnny might get the money.
Yeah.
And then they charge in and beat the crap out of Johnny. And the moves in this...
crew.
Yeah.
So the crew is Cortez, Castro, Mr. Cisco, and we were talking before about, like, people that would wrestle and then come to Lucha Underground and become a completely different character. We got Big Ryck, who, I don't know if you remember him as Ezekiel Jackson in, like, late 2000s WWE. He wasn't around much, but he was they gave it. They had a crack. They had a crack.
The name
at making
doesn't
Ezekiel
seem
Jackson
familiar. The guys who got beat up in the end, because they weren't really introduced in Lucha Underground, they were kind of just faces that shown up. I didn't know them previously, so they didn't mean like much to me when I watched it. I didn't know who any of those people were.
So Cortez, Castro, and Mr. Cisco, which are the two sort of, jobbers of that group, never saw the guys before this show. And everybody there serves a role, and these guys are certainly like, the red shirts from Star Trek. Like they're definitely gonna be the ones who get sacrificed, for the big heel. So but again, they really fit that role. Like the crew is, you'll find out where the crew sort of sits in like kind of who the most lethal factions and people are in Lucha Underground, but the crew is fun, and I like the fact that we've got Big Ryck here, and I'm really, really eagerly anticipating the next couple of episodes, because I know what storylines we're kind of on now, and I can't wait for you to get to experience what happens next with these particular characters. But so never heard of Ezekiel Jackson before that. What were your thoughts on the crew and just these guys as Dario Cueto's hired guns?
I couldn't make a total connection with them as I didn't know their name, but they all just had like a huge look to them. Like they all looked like they could be bodyguards for someone rich. They were really, really jacked, right? And when they came out, and
well, one of them is the other one's a little bit skinny and the other's a bit flabby, but I know what you mean. Like they have that, they carry that kind of threatening kind of vibe.
They would kick the crap out of you if you saw them. They're
an interesting crew, but like I say, we will find many more interesting characters as Lucha Underground goes on. But yeah, any final thoughts on the episode before we wrap it up?
The final thoughts for me is I tried my hardest to be critical with this, because with every wrestling show, even ones that I love to death, for some reason I just try to be really fucking critical about every show. And that's a weird side effect of being a wrestling fan in 2021. So don't feel bad about that. We all struggle with that. Don't worry. I'm always watching episodes like, oh no, that promo's not right. You could have done that differently. Come on. I not once had that with Lucha Underground, and that was so refreshing for me and really exciting, because we're gonna go down this rabbit hole, and it's going to be worth the journey.
Absolutely. And they obviously have the benefit of, getting to edit and choosing the right takes and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's a TV show. Vince McMahon famously said in the late 90s, "We make movies. We're not a wrestling company. We make movies." That was his, smarmy kind of way of saying we're sports entertainment now. But Lucha Underground came along in one swoop. It was just like, so this is how you should have done it maybe not right from the beginning, but for what WWE's trying to do, I think Lucha Underground did better WWE than they could do themselves. So it was a very important episode, and honestly, it's knowing where the show goes. Like, this episode's a little bit dull, to be completely honest. It gets that wild, so you've definitely got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, if this is dull, I'm all in for it.
Yeah, it really is. So, but that's episode 1. Now, we've got 3 little segments that we're going to do every episode. These should be a lot of fun. The first one's called Where Are They Now? That's where we take a look at what's going on with a Lucha Underground wrestler today and see what they're up to these days, basically. And the other segment is called What If They Were, which is where we have a look at somebody who wasn't in Lucha Underground and try and imagine what kind of gimmick or wild character they might have as we go through it. So, and then we'll give the show a rating at the end, which will be fun too. So let's start with Where Are They Now? With the obvious one here feels like Chavo Guerrero, because I know exactly where Chavo Guerrero is right now. He's actually in the state that I live in, helping them film Young Rock. Because I met him at a independent wrestling show just on the weekend. But Chavo hasn't wrestled for a long time, like as far as like in ring on TV and stuff like that. But he has been very busy in Hollywood. He was a big part of the safety and wrestling training and stuff for the TV show Glow. He's obviously working on set with the people who are doing Young Rock for the wrestling scenes and stuff in there. So Chavo Guerrero's actually kind of become this like Hollywood wrestling expert that if somebody wants to have a wrestling scene in their TV show or their movie, they go to Chavo Guerrero and he will, you know, make sure they've got the right people or that everyone's safe and everything like that. So what are your memories of Chavo Guerrero growing up? And what do you think about the fact that he's basically Hollywood now?
I never actually knew that Chavo was getting involved with Hollywood. So I'm guessing obviously he's working on Young Rock, but I'm guessing he'd be working on like a couple other shows like Heels and stuff, right?
I don't know for a fact that he's working on Heels. That might even
that's
be
the only
somebody
other
else,
wrestling show that I can think of.
Yeah, well, there's also Glow on Netflix, which was the one about the women's wrestling company. Which, if you haven't watched Glow, I highly recommend it. That's a great story. It's a little bit girly kind of thing because it's all girl characters. So some of the drama in it is, you know, your typical thing, but put that aside and just enjoy it for the story it is. It's a fantastic story with a wrestling backdrop, but that was a big deal, was Glow as well. So yeah, Chavo's doing pretty good for himself in 2021 or 2022 probably when this comes out.
Yeah, I'll give Glow a go. But yeah, my memories of Chavo when I was a younger kid, this is actually pretty funny. I had to play Chavo all the time. He was kind of my favorite wrestler when I would play SmackDown versus Raw. Because I always wanted to play Eddie Guerrero, but my brother would take Eddie because it's his PlayStation. So I'd have to be Chavo every single time.
So the Guerrero family rivalry lived on through your PlayStation 2, is that what you're saying?
And yeah, because I was a kid, I didn't get to watch him much. But as I've grown older now and looked into wrestling, I really love what Chavo Guerrero's done during his career. Him and his brother, his entire family in general. Legends.
You mean his uncle, Uncle Eddie?
Oh, his uncle. I thought they were brothers.
Yeah. No, it's one of those weird cases where they're uncle and nephew, but they're only like 2 years apart in age.
Yeah, that trips me out.
Yeah. It's pretty fair to assume that they're probably brothers, but yeah, it's funny when you think back to those video games and the real obscure wrestlers that you would use ad nauseum. Like, for me, it was Charlie Haas in SmackDown vs. Raw 06. Fucking love that guy. I'd build him up to be a world champion every single time. He's like 100 overall. Shelton Benjamin is 100 overall, feuding with him. Good times.
Oh, I don't think I've ever picked him once in my entire playtime of any SVR game.
For those listening, go check out FWCI Sports and Gaming on YouTube. I did a SmackDown 6 challenge on SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, where the only people I was allowed to draft were the top 6, and then after that it was just drafting from the bottom up of the free agents. So I had Charlie Haas on there, and I go into much detail about my bromance with Charlie Haas in that game.
I'll have to have a look at that one.
Yeah, definitely do. So the other segment is What If They Were? So this is where we take somebody who was never in Lucha Underground and think, what kind of batshit crazy character? And trust me, you haven't even seen the start of the batshit crazy characters that we're going to get in this show. But I thought I'd pick somebody that I know you're a fan of. What would New Jack do if he was in Lucha Underground? What kind of character? And
oh, I'd love to talk about this.
Lucha Underground's very much like it's kind of like GTA in the fact that it's a living world. Like, we're not just going to meet wrestlers. We're going to meet, like, law enforcement. We're going to meet fans. We're going to meet, like, it's very much a living universe. So this could really go many different ways. But first of all, shout out, rest in peace to New Jack, who only just passed away very recently. But
yeah, rest in peace, legend.
Yeah, but I know you're a big fan of his. So yeah, what do you think New Jack would be doing in Lucha Underground?
My first thought that comes to mind is New Jack in ECW was all about himself and the gangsters, but I feel with Dario, a businessman who has a lot of money in this Lucha Underground show, he's very powerful, has a lot of money. I feel like if New Jack was to join Lucha, they could do a really cool story where New Jack works for Dario and Dario gets New Jack to carry out hits for him.
Yeah, so kind of like a different version of what they're doing with the crew, except instead of having one giant dude and two like noobs, you've got New Jack.
New Jack would annihilate the crew single-handedly.
Yeah, like it's not even oh no, it's this imposing visual of this big guy and his two sidekicks. Like no, it's New Jack, and he's got a friggin' cutthroat, and everybody needs to get the hell out of the way. Like, oh dude, the more as this show goes on, we should really revisit what New Jack would be doing in Lucha Underground, because really you're gonna start to see some incredibly wild shit. But I like that idea of him being Dario Cueto's terrifying sidekick. It kind of reminds me of I don't know if you ever saw the TV show Gotham, but in the early season, Victor Zsasz is like the sidekick to one of the main villains, and I think like maybe Penguin or somebody else. But he's terrifying in that. Like, he looks creepy, he's got his head shaved, he's got no eyebrows, like, he just looks really unsettling. And he doesn't need an army behind him. It's just Victor Zsasz on his own is, absolutely terrifying. So, I could see him filling that kind of role. What would I try and plug him in if I was going to put him in Lucha Underground? New Jack. Yeah, I feel like you might have hit the nail on the head, like being the hired gun. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then I could even see like a plot line evolving after that where Dario tries to screw over New Jack for money or something like that, and then New Jack turns on Dario. Dario's shit scared because New Jack is basically like face. John Wick and fucking is just out to get this guy.
Alright, so your story arc for New Jack is he comes in as like the most vicious of heels that just strikes fear in the hearts of everybody, and then he has a massive babyface turn and goes full John Wick on Dario Cueto and all of his goons as the season goes on. I think that is the perfect way to end the first episode, because that is a great storyline. I would love to see New Jack doing that kind of shit in Lucha Underground. But that's going to wrap it up, everyone. That's episode 1 of Back to the Temple, the Lucha Underground Rewatch podcast. I want to thank my guest host, Malik, who has blessed us with his time. Malik, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everybody for listening into the podcast.
If you are interested in checking out anything else I'm up to, go check out FWCI etc. on YouTube. I do reactions to movies, TV shows, comedy stuff. I'm doing rankings of TV show sketches for Chappelle's Show, which has been a lot of fun. Also, FWCI Sports and Gaming, which is where all my wrestling content goes. Weekly episodes of World Wrestling Australia. I'm going to be covering the shit out of WWE 2K22, so if you like wrestling video games, you're going to want to go subscribe to FWCI Sports and Gaming on YouTube. And Malik, anything to plug?
Yeah, you guys can come follow us on @BackToTheTemple on Twitter. Thank you guys so much for listening into the podcast.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Malik, and we will catch you guys later.
Peace.